They
But
don't
what
listen
about
at
the
all.
reaction? Because from otherwise decent people, they seem to have no issue with this. And I know we're talking about monsters. I know we're talking about men who gunned down over 100 people, including 3 children. But the justification for torture,
Yeah.
that worries me. That worries me about where we are.
Well, I think. Look,
as a culture.
I think that. Look, I mean, these terrorists, obviously, the lowest of the low life. So, I mean, to do that, to go into a shopping centre and a theatre and start gunning people down, we've seen it elsewhere. We've seen it in London. We've seen it in Paris. We've seen it sadly around the world. And it's inevitable that there is rage in people's hearts about this. And there's even more rage in the West because our governments tell us we shouldn't be allowed to feel rage.
No, we can't even condemn it. We had the Manchester bombing, and there was almost an immediate drive against Islamophobia.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always the same, the same. But the thing is, there is, when somebody does something, when a group of people do something like ISIS appear to have done in Moscow, of course, there's a sort of feeling of vengefulness and revenge. Now, in the West, we would hope that we would prosecute that revenge as carefully as possible, and that it would be legal, that it would go through the law courts if the people are captured alive. But in other theatres, they'd be killed in operation and during the attack and else, other things. It's just that, that is an inevitable tendency to want to have revenge after that. But, I mean, the fact that in Russia that revenge extends to torture, as I say, is not at all a surprise in Russia. But I mean, I think you can want there to be no pity for the terrorists without encouraging them to be mutilated by the Russian troops. I mean, it's just...
Now, before you go, I've got to ask you about the US. We're seeing the political prosecution of Donald Trump. They've been trying to take his assets. Today, there's been a development there with the bond being reduced dramatically, and he's saying that he'll be posting that new amount. I think it's 175 million US. How do you see this effort to get Trump before he can be re-elected? It seems to be a determined effort from the Democrats and their lawmakers to politicise the justice system. And it really has a dangerous effect. You look at some of the polling now, trust in the US justice system is at record lows. People do not trust the system.
Well, it's a very interesting thing, that because, of course, a lot of Americans didn't trust the justice system already. I mean, the conviction rates in the US courts, for anyone who's been through them, are astronomically high.
Almost Beijing-like, but not quite.
Yeah, I mean, it's teetering on 99%, and so a lot of Americans who've had experience of that already distrusted it. Then you've had the sort of super politicization of things like the Supreme Court, and then the Trump persecution. I do think it's a kind of persecution. I have plenty of criticisms of Donald Trump, but if you wanted to make sure he wasn't elected again, then run a really good candidate against him and highlight the things that he did in his term of office that you disagree with. Most people, I think, in America can see that this is a form of endless persecution against Trump. It certainly looks like that. This way of sort of trying to ruin him financially just looks like the final sort of, the final turn of that dial. And I think a lot of people will see it as being cruel and unusual. I think it's only helping Trump, though. I mean, as you say, I'm not sure that outside America people are quite prepared for this. The polls that you've seen and I've seen that say that he's likely to win against Biden later this year. I mean, personally, I have just about enough existential energy to, cover various wars and things. I'm not sure if I have the existential energy this time, Rita, to cover Trump-Biden Part 2. We last met in America, in New York, in Trump-Biden round 1. I don't know. I mean, those guys might be there for round 2. You might be there for round 2. I think I might be just propping up the bar, exhausted. But I'm not sure. This is going to be brutal,